Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Trump's Greenland pursuit sparks international contentions rise over potential territorial interests. Trump's Venezuela oil plan meets skepticism. Seizures intensify. Mexico faces pressure amid escalating tensions. Iran protests intensify amidst government crackdown. Demonstrations continue under government control. The U.S. economy shows mixed signals. Slow job growth amid falling unemployment. Economic uncertainty persists despite positive indicators. South Africa's war games spark U.S.-South Africa tensions. Military exercises raise diplomatic concerns. The EU-Mercosur trade deal, a summary trade agreement, details are being examined. Trump threatens further airstrikes on Nigeria over Christian killings. U.S. threatens action over religious violence. The Digest. ICE officers. Minneapolis confrontation and East Wing expansion. Law enforcement and government building developments are noted. Storm Goretti. Tens of thousands without power as severe weather disrupts UK. Severe weather causes widespread power outages. Swiss ski bar fire sparks investigation and grief. Tragic fire leads to an investigation and mourning. Federal agents shoot pair involved with Venezuelan gang in Portland shooting. A shooting occurred involving suspected gang members. Philippines landfill collapse. Rescue efforts intensify amidst growing hope. Rescue operations continue with rising optimism. Duke challenges London's approach to Trouble's legacy bill. Political disputes surround the legacy bill. Peckham woman critically injured in Christmas Eve shooting. A serious shooting injured a woman. Trump's Greenland pursuit sparks international concern. Recent news coverage centers around President Trump's increasingly assertive stance regarding Greenland, fueled by national security concerns and a desire for territorial control. The core issue revolves around Trump's insistence on owning Greenland to prevent Russian and Chinese influence, sparking debate and raising questions about international relations and NATO stability. Trump's strategy involves pursuing a deal with Denmark to acquire Greenland, though the territory's leaders, including the opposition, have repeatedly rejected this approach, stating they do not want to be Americans. We do not want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders. The Greenlandic people overwhelmingly desire self-determination and oppose any annexation by the United States. The U.S. administration is exploring various options, including a potential military intervention, explicitly stating they would do it the hard way if a peaceful acquisition proves impossible. This stance has generated significant concern among NATO allies, with leaders from France, Germany, the UK, Italy, Poland, and Spain jointly affirming that Greenland belongs to its own people and that such a unilateral action would have serious consequences for the alliance. Discussions are ongoing between U.S. officials and Danish representatives, along with Greenland's head of representation to the U.S. However, Greenland's parliament, the Inatsisartut, is scheduled to convene an emergency meeting to address the situation. The U.S. has been actively investigating potential incentives to sway Greenlanders, but these efforts have been met with resistance. Many Greenlanders have dismissed offers of money, asserting their right to self-governance. The strategic importance of Greenland, its location between North America and the Arctic, its potential for early warning systems, and its rich natural resources are central to the dispute. Trump's administration views Greenland as a critical asset and is determined to secure it, regardless of the diplomatic and geopolitical ramifications. The situation highlights a renewed focus on Arctic security and underscores the ongoing tensions between major global powers. The future of Greenland remains uncertain, but the U.S.'s unwavering pursuit of control is undeniably reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the region. Trump's Venezuela oil plan meets skepticism. Seizures intensify. Donald Trump's ambitious plan to revitalize Venezuela's oil industry through a $100 billion investment has encountered significant resistance from major oil companies, primarily due to concerns regarding instability and the need for substantial security guarantees. Executives, including Darren Woods of ExxonMobil, expressed skepticism, citing the need for established legal and commercial frameworks before committing to investments. Chevron, the only currently operating U.S. oil firm, projected a potential 50% increase in its output within 18-24 months, contingent on receiving specific administrative permissions. Despite Trump's assertions about Venezuela's stability and vast oil reserves, the industry remains cautious, prioritizing long-term security and financial assurances. The situation is further complicated by ongoing U.S. seizures of sanctioned oil tankers, including the recently seized Alina, which was attempting to break through a naval blockade. 5 tankers linked to Venezuelan oil exports have been seized in recent weeks, demonstrating the U.S.'s aggressive approach to enforcing sanctions. The capture of former President Nicolas Maduro has not prompted widespread public reaction in Venezuela, with journalist Mary Triney Mena reporting a largely quiet response in Caracas. The U.S. intends to control the sale of Venezuela's oil, depositing proceeds into U.S.-controlled accounts, aiming to benefit the Venezuelan people. U.S. diplomats have begun a phased resumption of operations, including a visit to Caracas to assess the possibility of reopening the U.S. embassy, previously closed in 2019. However, the administration's efforts face challenges, including the need to address security concerns and navigate the complex political landscape of Venezuela. The U.S. is actively pursuing the enforcement of sanctions and the control of Venezuelan oil exports, while seeking to leverage the country's oil reserves as a tool for influencing the Venezuelan government. The timeline for significant investment remains uncertain, with officials acknowledging that rebuilding Venezuela's oil industry will require a sustained and multifaceted effort. Senators have criticized Trump's actions as crony capitalism. Iran protests intensify amidst government crackdown as protests continue across Iran. Hospitals are overwhelmed with injuries following 13 nights of demonstrations, fueled by economic grievances and calls for the end of the Islamic Republic. The United States, led by President Donald Trump, has issued strong warnings to Iran, threatening repercussions, while Iranian authorities have hardened their stance, labeling protesters as troublemakers and disruptors of peace and security. The Supreme National Security Council has issued coordinated warnings, threatening decisive and necessary legal action. Key entities involved include Iranian President Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who remains defiant, and Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the last Shah, who has emerged as a prominent figure, seeking to lead a potential transition. Support for Pahlavi is growing, particularly among younger Iranians disillusioned with the current regime. The protests have been met with a significant government crackdown, with hospitals struggling to cope with the influx of casualties. Trump has repeatedly threatened military action, adding to the instability. Pahlavi has been supported by figures like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Analysts suggest that Pahlavi's rise is a symptom of broader discontent within Iranian society, stemming from economic hardship, political repression, and a desire for change. However, concerns remain about his inexperience and the lack of a concrete plan for a transition. The situation is further complicated by the potential for external involvement, with Trump's willingness to consider military intervention adding another layer of uncertainty. The protests represent a significant challenge to the Islamic Republic's authority, and the future of the country remains uncertain. The government's response, including the use of force, continues to escalate the situation, raising fears of a wider conflict. The international community remains divided on how to respond, with many countries calling for restraint and dialogue. The U.S. economy shows mixed signals: slow job growth amid falling unemployment. The U.S. economy presented a mixed picture in December 2025, characterized by sluggish job creation alongside a decline in the unemployment rate. Despite a strong start to the year for stocks, with the Dow, S&P 500, and Nasdaq Composite experiencing their best week since November, the economy added only 50,000 jobs last month, significantly below expectations. This represents the slowest job growth since 2020. The unemployment rate, however, dipped to 4.4%, a decrease from 4.5% in November. President Donald Trump announced measures to address the housing affordability crisis, directing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to purchase $200 billion in mortgage bonds, and proposing a ban on large institutional investors from acquiring additional single-family homes. He intends to further outline these proposals, including additional housing and affordability measures, at a speech in Davos, Switzerland. The economic slowdown is attributed to several factors, including President Trump's policy changes, tariffs, immigration restrictions, and government spending cuts, and a generally weak employment market. The economy has, however, maintained a growth rate of 4.3% over the 3 months to September, driven by consumer spending and exports. The Federal Reserve responded to the slowdown by cutting its key lending rate 3 times starting in September, aiming to stimulate the economy. However, policymakers remain divided regarding the extent of further rate cuts, particularly given concerns about still elevated inflation. Stock market performance during the week was robust, with the Dow up 227 points, the S&P 500 up 0.71%, and the Nasdaq up 0.93%, reflecting positive investor sentiment fueled by the declining unemployment rate. The VX, a measure of market volatility, decreased by 6%, indicating a calmer market environment. Looking ahead, investors will be closely monitoring fourth quarter 2025 corporate earnings and the December inflation report, scheduled for release on Tuesday. The overall economic outlook remains uncertain, with the Federal Reserve navigating a delicate balance between supporting economic growth and controlling inflation. South Africa's war games spark U.S.-South Africa tensions. South Africa's hosting of joint military exercises involving China, Iran and Russia's intensifying tensions with the United States, primarily due to the optics and potential implications for trade negotiations. The week-long naval drills, dubbed Will for Peace, are led by China and involve a coalition known as BRICS-US, which includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. These exercises, initially planned as MOSIA 3 and later renamed, are intended for joint maritime safety operations, interoperability drills, and maritime protection serials. The U.S. has expressed strong disapproval, viewing the exercises as a politically charged move, particularly given the timing coinciding with the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Critics, including the Democratic Alliance (DA), argue the exercises undermine South Africa's non-aligned foreign policy stance and involve sanctioned nations embroiled in active conflicts. South Africa's defense minister asserts the exercises are a valuable training opportunity, boosting troop morale and contributing to a safe maritime environment. However, analysts warn the exercises could complicate trade negotiations with the U.S., a key trading partner. The U.S. concerns are amplified by President Trump's previous criticism and threats regarding South Africa's relationship with China and Russia. The situation is further complicated by South Africa's weakened defense capabilities, resulting from years of budget cuts. The country lacks sufficient naval assets for extensive overseas exercises. Despite these challenges, South Africa's Deputy Defense Minister defended the initiative, emphasizing the importance of safe maritime activities. Political analyst Sandile Swana believes the exercises are a welcome step towards combating piracy and ensuring international trade security. However, other commentators like William Gumeed argue that the situation is precarious, with South Africa potentially caught between geopolitical conflicts. Gumeed stresses the economic risks, warning that a more conciliatory foreign policy is crucial to avoid being squeezed between U.S.-China tensions and the conflicts involving the U.S., Iran, and Russia. The potential loss of U.S. trade and investment represents a significant concern for South Africa's struggling economy. The EU-Mercosur trade deal. A summary. After 25 years of negotiations, the European Union has finalized a free trade agreement with the Mercosur trading bloc, comprised of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. The agreement's conclusion, finalized in Brussels, represents the EU's largest free trade accord to date, occurring amidst a global landscape of increasing protectionism and following recent U.S. trade policies and the Venezuelan situation. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva celebrated the agreement as a historic day for multilateralism, emphasizing its significance as a positive step forward in international trade and economic growth for both the EU and Mercosur. The deal's implementation will require approval from the European Parliament within the coming months. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described it as a win-win scenario, anticipating tangible benefits for consumers and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. However, the agreement has faced significant opposition, primarily from European farmers who fear that cheaper imports of goods such as beef, poultry, and sugar will negatively impact their livelihoods. Protests erupted in several European nations, including France and Belgium, with farmers utilizing tractors and staging demonstrations to voice their concerns. Judy Peters, a representative for a Belgian young farmers group, articulated the widespread sentiment, stating, "There is a lot of pain and a lot of anger stemming from the potential economic consequences." The agreement's passage signifies a strategic move by the EU to foster trade relations amidst a changing global economic environment, though its success hinges on addressing the anxieties of European agricultural producers. The deal is intended to bolster economic growth, but faces challenges related to potential trade imbalances and the protection of European agricultural sectors. Trump threatens further airstrikes on Nigeria over Christian killings. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a stark warning, stating he would authorize further aerial attacks on Nigeria if the ongoing killings of Christians persist. This follows his previous declaration of Nigeria as a country of particular concern due to the perceived threat to its Christian population. During an interview with the New York Times, Trump responded to questions regarding the Christmas Day airstrikes in Sokoto State, targeting Islamist militants, suggesting they could escalate into a repeated campaign. The Nigerian government vehemently rejected Trump's earlier accusations, asserting that Muslims, Christians, and non-religious individuals are all victims of jihadist attacks. Trump maintained that while Muslims are also being killed in Nigeria, the primary targets are Christians. Nigeria's population is roughly divided equally between Christians predominantly in the south and Muslims concentrated in the north. For 15 years, the Northeast has been ravaged by Islamist insurgency, led by Boko Haram and IS affiliates, alongside other security challenges including kidnapping and separatist unrest. The U.S. airstrikes targeted camps operated by the Lakurawa Group, linked to IS in the Sahel region near the Niger border. Neither side has released casualty figures, and the outcome of the operation remains unclear. Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Maitama Tuggar clarified that the strikes were a joint operation with no religious motivation, explicitly denying any connection to Christmas. He confirmed the operation received approval from President Bola Tinubu and involved Nigeria's armed forces. Tuggar emphasized that the timing of the strikes was coincidental, unrelated to the holiday. The U.S. government maintains that Lakurawa is linked to IS groups. Despite these claims, IS has not officially acknowledged ties to the group's activities or announced affiliations. The situation highlights ongoing security complexities within Nigeria and the contentious debate surrounding the targeting of religious groups. The Digest ICE officers' Minneapolis confrontation and East Wing expansion, a fatal Minneapolis confrontation involving an immigration and customs enforcement ICE agent and Renee Good has ignited controversy, with the release of video footage capturing the critical moments. The video, obtained by CNN and initially shared by Vice President J.D. Vance, shows Agent Jonathan Ross approaching Good's vehicle, which was blocking traffic. Good, the driver, engaged in a verbal exchange with Ross, stating she was not angry. The footage reveals Good's wife, Becca Good, also confronting Ross, questioning his actions. Another officer instructed Good to exit the vehicle. Following the verbal exchange, Good reversed her car and accelerated forward, prompting Ross to fire 3 shots. The video doesn't show the impact of the vehicle on Ross, but bystander footage suggests a collision occurred. ICE Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin defended the agent's actions, asserting the footage supports the agency's claim that Good attempted to harm law enforcement. She emphasized Ross's fear for his life and the justification for self-defense. Meanwhile, an architect presented detailed plans for President Trump's proposed East Wing expansion. The plans included a grand stair, additional space for utilities and food service, and a second-story addition to the West Wing colonnade. The project is slated to be funded entirely by private donors. Mayor of Minneapolis has criticized Vice President J.D. Vance's defense of the ICE officer, highlighting the serious implications of the incident. The release of the video footage has intensified scrutiny of the situation and fueled debate surrounding law enforcement tactics and interactions with civilians. The architect's presentation regarding the East Wing expansion provides a separate, significant development amidst the ongoing controversy. Donald Trump's administration is pursuing a multifaceted strategy targeting Mexican drug cartels, marked by escalating tensions with the Mexican government and a reassertion of the Monroe Doctrine. The core of this strategy involves heightened military presence along the southern border, aimed at disrupting drug trafficking operations and leveraging economic sanctions to pressure Mexico into greater cooperation. Simultaneously, the administration is seeking to reassert U.S. influence within the Western Hemisphere, aligning with the historical Monroe Doctrine. A central element of this approach is the recent intervention in Venezuela, targeting Nicolas Maduro, accused of narco-terrorism, signaling a willingness to directly confront transnational criminal networks. This action has heightened diplomatic friction with Mexico, where President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has resisted U.S. demands for greater collaboration and has voiced concerns about potential U.S. military involvement. Trump repeatedly asserts the need for decisive action against drug cartels, framing the situation as a threat to American lives and security. He has advocated for increased military deployment to the border and the imposition of severe economic sanctions on Mexico. Despite these efforts, Mexican authorities have resisted U.S. demands, emphasizing Mexico's sovereignty and the potential destabilizing consequences of U.S. military intervention. A key development is the potential for U.S. military action in Mexico, prompted by Trump's persistent calls for a direct response to the drug trade. This prospect has raised significant concerns within Mexico, given historical sensitivities and the potential for widespread violence. Furthermore, the administration is employing the Monroe Doctrine as a framework for its policy, aiming to reassert U.S. preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. This strategy encompasses both diplomatic pressure and potential economic leverage. Recent developments highlight the complexities and risks associated with this approach, underscoring the deep-seated tensions and the potential for escalation. The administration's actions are reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the Americas, demanding careful observation and analysis. Storm Goretti, tens of thousands without power as severe weather disrupts UK. Severe weather caused widespread disruption across the UK following Storm Goretti, with tens of thousands experiencing power outages and travel chaos. The storm brought strong winds, heavy rain, and significant flooding to numerous areas, primarily in the Midlands, Sussex, Kent, and surrounding regions. The most significant impacts were seen in coastal areas, where high winds and waves caused flooding along the south coast, damaging beach huts, roads, and infrastructure. Extensive flooding occurred on the Pevensey levels in Sussex, impacting the coastline and requiring emergency responses. The Midlands experienced considerable snowfall, leading to travel disruptions and school closures. Power outages were widespread, particularly in rural and exposed areas of Sussex and Kent, attributed to storm damage. Utility companies worked to restore power, but repairs were hampered by the continued challenging conditions. Travel networks were severely affected, with road closures, ferry disruptions, and train delays. The Midlands experienced significant snowfall, leading to travel disruptions and school closures. The storm's impact was compounded by the sheer volume of water and debris, requiring extensive cleanup efforts. Emergency services were stretched to their limits, responding to flood alerts and assisting stranded motorists. The National Trust reported damage to coastal properties, while the Environment Agency worked to manage flooding on the Pevensey levels. Utility companies reported extensive damage to power infrastructure, leading to prolonged outages. Local authorities mobilized to assist residents and coordinate emergency responses. Despite easing winds on Friday morning, coastal areas remained vulnerable to high waves and further rainfall. Authorities urged residents in flood risk areas to remain vigilant and follow guidance. The long-term impact of the storm is still being assessed, with significant cleanup and repair work expected to continue. The event highlighted the vulnerability of infrastructure to extreme weather events and underscored the importance of preparedness and resilience. Swiss ski bar fire sparks investigation and grief. A devastating fire at La Constellation Bar in Crans-Montana, Switzerland on New Year's Eve resulted in 40 fatalities and 116 injuries, prompting widespread outrage and a full investigation. The fire, believed to have been started by sparklers in champagne bottles, exposed critical failures in safety inspections and local governance. Initial reports revealed that the bar hadn't undergone safety checks for 5 years, highlighting a significant lapse in regulatory oversight. The local mayor, Nicolas Farad, admitted to only becoming aware of the lack of inspections after the tragedy, emphasizing insufficient resources for inspections across the numerous resorts. The investigation centers on the bar's co-owners, Jax and Jessica Moretti, who were detained following questioning by Swiss prosecutors. They are being investigated for manslaughter by negligence, bodily harm by negligence, and arson by negligence. Jax Moretti was detained due to concerns about his potential flight risk. The couple expressed devastation and offered apologies to the victims and those injured. The incident has triggered a broader examination of Switzerland's devolved political system, where local officials are responsible for safety inspections. This system, while intended to ensure accountability, proved vulnerable in this case. The lack of consistent inspections and the limited resources allocated to the task fueled public anger and questions about the effectiveness of the local government. Investigations are ongoing, with prosecutors focusing on the circumstances surrounding the fire's ignition. Witnesses reported a chaotic scene with young people celebrating New Year's Eve. The tragedy has drawn attention to the potential dangers of celebratory practices and the importance of robust safety protocols. President and Prime Minister of France were in attendance at the memorial service and vowed to ensure those responsible were identified. The case has prompted calls for reform of the Swiss system of local governance and a reassessment of safety regulations within the country's popular ski resorts. The focus remains on determining the precise cause of the fire and holding those accountable for the devastating consequences. Federal agents shoot pair involved with Venezuelan gang in Portland shooting 2 individuals wounded in a shooting involving federal agents in Portland, Oregon, are linked to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua and have been involved in a prostitution ring. The incident occurred on Thursday afternoon following a traffic stop. According to the Department of Homeland Security (DHS), the driver, Luis David Nino Moncada, illegally entered the U.S. in 2022 and attempted to run over agents before fleeing with the passenger. Nino Moncada and Yorlanese Betsabeth Zambrano Contreras, who entered the U.S. illegally in 2023, were hospitalized and their conditions remain unknown. Zambrano Contreras is implicated in a recent shooting in Portland and was previously arrested for prostitution. DACE alleges she played an active role in the Tren de Aragua prostitution ring. Initial reports incorrectly stated the pair were a married couple. Following the shooting, the pair drove approximately 5 miles to an apartment complex seeking medical assistance. The incident follows a similar fatal shooting by a federal agent in Minneapolis, which sparked widespread protests against federal law enforcement operations in U.S. cities. The Minneapolis agent also attempted to run over his target. Both shootings involved individuals attempting to evade law enforcement. Portland Police Department officers responded to the scene and provided medical assistance until paramedics arrived. The two individuals were discovered several blocks from the initial location of the shooting. DHS officials emphasized that the information regarding the individuals' connections to the gang is intended to provide context, but does not condone or support the actions taken. They confirmed the presence of Tren de Aragua in Portland, though it is not considered as significant as initially believed. Hundreds of people protested outside an immigration detention center in Portland on Thursday night, resulting in 6 arrests for disorderly conduct. The investigation is ongoing, and it remains unclear if the individuals will face criminal charges related to the shooting. The events highlight ongoing tensions surrounding federal immigration enforcement operations and the resulting public response. Philippines' landfill collapse rescue efforts intensify amidst growing hope. A desperate search is underway in the Philippines following a catastrophic landslide at a privately owned landfill in Cebu City, resulting in dozens still unaccounted for. The collapse, which occurred on Thursday while 110 workers were present, has tragically confirmed 4 fatalities and left more than 30 individuals missing. Rescue teams are working tirelessly against the clock, battling hazardous conditions and unstable debris to locate survivors. Mayor Nestor Archival reported the detection of signs of life within specific areas of the landfill site, prompting a crucial shift in the rescue operation. Authorities are now deploying a 50-ton crane to facilitate more targeted excavation. The challenging environment, characterized by unstable piles of waste, presents a significant obstacle for the rescue teams. The privately owned Binaliu landfill was the site of the disaster, highlighting concerns regarding waste management practices in the region. The workers, who were engaged in routine operations, are at the center of the ongoing search. Relatives of the missing are anxiously awaiting any updates, expressing a desperate hope for the safe return of their loved ones. Cebu City Councilor Dave Tumulak, chairman of the city's Disaster Council, emphasized the urgency of the situation, stating that the rescue effort is operating continuously. The situation underscores the vulnerability of workers in informal waste management sectors and the need for stricter safety regulations and improved infrastructure. The search continues with a primary focus on identifying and extracting any potential survivors, acknowledging the limited time window for success. The incident has reignited debates about responsible waste disposal and the safety of those involved in its handling. DUP challenges London's approach to Trouble's legacy bill. The Democratic Unionist Party, DUP leader Gavin Robinson, has issued a strong warning to the British government, urging it not to spinelessly surrender to the Irish government's demands regarding the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. This follows Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's suggestion of amending the bill to provide greater protections for Army veterans, a move swiftly rejected by Irish Foreign Minister Helen McEntee, who stated that no changes would shift the balance of the agreement reached last year. The bill, currently progressing through Parliament, aims to implement a ban on inquests and civil actions related to incidents during the Troubles era, incorporating robust protections for former soldiers, a feature absent from the original September agreement. Robinson's email to DUP members highlighted the need for a legal framework that clearly distinguishes between those who upheld the law and those who engaged in terrorism and violence. He acknowledged Sir Keir's commitment to addressing veterans' concerns, anticipating amendments when the bill reaches a stage where changes can be considered. The DUP leader sharply criticized the Irish government's insistence on maintaining the original agreement, framing it as a challenge to the Prime Minister's willingness to prioritize sovereignty and protect the armed forces. The proposed legacy deal includes a package of protections for veterans, including safeguards for those in old age, and establishes a legacy commission with independent oversight and a statutory duty not to duplicate previous investigations, unless compelling reasons exist. The commission will also have 2 new directors for investigations and must consider the health and well-being of potential witnesses. Over 500 people lost their lives during the 30-year conflict in Northern Ireland. The Irish government maintains that the agreement represents a fine balance, reflecting the extensive work undertaken to incorporate diverse voices. The Prime Minister's plan includes protections for Army veterans, but not paramilitaries. The ongoing dispute underscores fundamental disagreements about how to address the legacy of the Troubles and the appropriate role of the British and Irish governments in resolving this complex issue. Peckham woman critically injured in Christmas Eve shooting. On Christmas Eve, a 21-year-old woman was critically injured following a shooting at her home in Peckham, South London. The incident occurred between 2230 and 2300 GMT on Cronin Street, a residential area within the borough. Metropolitan Police responded to reports of gunshots fired directly into the woman's front door while she was present with her 1-year-old son. Investigators determined that 2 male suspects discharged 7 shots at the property. The woman sustained multiple gunshot wounds as a direct result of the attack. Emergency services were immediately dispatched and transported her to a local hospital. She remains in critical care, receiving intensive treatment during the Christmas period. Medical professionals are cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but her condition remains serious. Thankfully, the woman's 1-year-old son was unharmed and was not present during the shooting. Police are actively investigating the incident, treating it as a serious crime. A large-scale investigation is underway, with officers examining CCTV footage and gathering witness statements to identify and apprehend the perpetrators. The motive for the attack is currently unknown, and detectives are exploring all potential avenues, including gang-related violence and targeted attacks. The area surrounding Cronin Street has been cordoned off as a crime scene, and forensic teams are meticulously collecting evidence. Detectives are appealing to the public for any information that could assist with their inquiries. The incident has understandably caused considerable concern within the Peckham community, and police are working to reassure residents and maintain a visible presence in the area. The investigation is ongoing, and further updates will be provided as they become available.